Hello, everyone. Welcome to PDA North America's Q&A. I'm Ruth from PDA North America, and joining us today is Lindsay Flanagan, and her husband, Daryl, will be here in just a minute. Lindsay, do you want to say hello before we get started?
Yeah, do you want me to introduce us a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So I told Ruth before we got on, my husband would not be my husband if he did not come in here a minute or two late. We're also having kids sleep issues. But I'm Lindsay Flanagan. I am a licensed therapist. I own a little coaching and education business called Hive Parents. And I am married to Daryl. Obviously, we've been married for 14 years. We found out he was autistic with the PDA profile after we found out our son was as well. We have two boys. Our PDAer is 10 and a half, and then we have a 9-year-old who we're still kind of trying to figure him out. So
Great. Awesome. Okay, so we had a lot of questions submitted by quite a few people. So we're going to go ahead and go through them. We saw a lot of themes. So hopefully if we don't get to everything, we'll get to some of the themes that kind of surround a lot of the questions. And there's Daryl just on time. What's up, Daryl? How you doing?
Oh, I'm autistic, so I'm always late.
Sounds right.
How are you?
All right, cool. Okay, our first question is, I'm having trouble in my marriage. I am PDA and my husband is as well as my son. There are issues that I don't know what to do about. Um, there are no, I can, oh, sorry, there's a typo here. I'm trying to figure out what it says. There are no issues that are important. I'm so sorry. I don't know. I can't figure out what this says. So if somebody's here and knows what they were saying, please drop it in the chat. I'm going to ask a different question. Sorry, guys. Okay. How can you get your PDA kid to believe that they are loved when they have low self-esteem and self-worth? Telling them so just results in angry responses that they're the worst. You're already trying to show them with snuggles, playing all the time, bringing them to and from activities, buying them things, co-sleeping, homeschooling, etc. But our 8-year-old is convinced that he's unloved and worthless. They feel shame over everything. They are an externalized PDA kid who does need constant engagement and attention, is exhausting for two parents. Dad is internalized PDA and is easily triggered by the kiddo.
you want to start? You want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think the hard thing is that you feel like with parenting, right? Like A plus B should equal C. And the harder you work, the more results you should see. And I think it's just messy being human, and it's really hard to parent complex kids. It's hard to be a complex kid. And I think that it sounds like I don't know if it's blaming yourself necessarily, but feeling like you're doing something wrong if you are doing all of these things correctly and not really getting to where you want to be. I really just think it is such a marathon. And I think continuing to not shame your kid for their reactions, and we're all human and we're all going to mess up sometimes and yell or say things that we don't mean, but I think continuing to not shame them and show them that this is just the way their brain works, that this is, you know, it's complicated to be human. You're going to help them figure it out. I think it's somewhat of a mindset shift to just realize you're playing the long game, and it's just going to be a lot of years of support. What do you think?
I think that's a good answer. Um, it's hard to tell without asking the person who asked this question, but I do wonder if um, what they're describing, does that happen after an event, an emotional event? Um, because if it happens it would change my answers, what I'm trying to say. If it's something that happens only after an emotional event, which I can relate to personally, both as a parent and as a person, then I think it would be important to start to drip feed the reinforcement and reassurance, I should say, when everything is okay, when things are quote unquote normal, and there's not been an emotional event of some sort, and people's emotions are normal. I think it's important to reinforce, not just when times are tough or really good or really bad, that hey, we love you, we're gonna get through this, we're gonna figure this out, and everything's gonna be okay. But just to say that during the day, just
Mhm.
casually, you know, so that they don't only hear it in those moments.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, guys. Okay, I'm going to go on to another question. Sometimes my demand avoidant husband will adamantly declare something based on his demand avoidance in front of my kid. And then I feel the need to correct him so she doesn't feed into the logic and she's also demand avoidant. Or he will get angry and act inappropriately. He would rather I pull him aside in private. And often I do, as I know it's important for both the parents to be on the same page. And I don't want to embarrass him or escalate the dysregulation, but I also don't want her to think it's okay behavior. Is there a way that teach my daughter to not do those things, or is this thinking based on his avoidance without correcting him in the moment?
Yes.
My husband's crawling in the background.
Yes. Sorry.
See that. I see that. Can he bark for us? No, I'm just kidding.
We'll go, you answer first because
Yeah.
you immediately said yes.
Yes. I I think here's what I would recommend. Number one, I think that generally speaking, for parents, well, you model your behavior in front of your children, right? And I think there's two different things going on here. If Lindsay and I have a disagreement about something that has nothing to do with our children, isn't modeling any behavior for them, we take that, you know, to text or behind closed doors. But if one of us is modeling behavior that we don't want our children to see, then I think it's okay to kindly correct them. And then what you do is you take those conversations behind closed doors and you say, okay, I can't, I think this is not appropriate for you to act this way. Can you please work on this? And if you get buy-in from the husband at that point, then the other thing I'd recommend doing is apologizing to your son, or in this case, it sounds like a daughter, which I think we've tried to normalize in our household of like, we make mistakes and it's okay that that happens. It's okay as long as you try to correct those mistakes, right? And so if I do something that behaviorally is not something that's not modeling good behavior for children, I will apologize to them for that. As soon as it's happened. And Lindsay, I think, has a right to correct me gently in the moment, and then we take it behind the scenes. We talk about, she airs her concerns about it, and we have to come to an agreement on that, right? That, yep, I was wrong to do that. So what can I do in the future? As long as I think those conversations are had when time, not just in reaction to some event, but behind the scenes when things are okay. I do think that's important. And I think it's okay. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's hard because I do think a lot of traditional parenting tells you, like, don't do that stuff in front of your kids, right? Like, you always need to have those conversations elsewhere. But to this person's point, like, when your partner is modeling things that could be abusive or just, not kind, then I think that's fair to bring it up and have open discussions. And I think that's really important in PDA families anyway, is just kind of having an open culture of discussion. And as you know, so many of our kids can't implicitly be taught things because it triggers their demand avoidance. So the modeling is all that much more important, right? Of like how you handle conflicts, how you take accountability for yourself. And then sort of separately from that, when there's been times that I've been alone with the kids and they have brought up like dad yelling at them or dad getting really upset about something, which doesn't really happen anymore. But when they used to, I would just really acknowledge that and acknowledge the behavior, but not obviously, just say to them, like, he loves you. He's a good dad. He gets really stressed too. That's how his brain That's how his brain works. It is never okay for him to yell or say those things to you. And he's working on it. And, I'll always keep you safe. But just acknowledging that I also recognize that it's not okay, but that he still loves them and is trying.
I think it's also important to model good um, behavior, like interpersonal behavior or like relationship behavior,
Yeah.
right? As well on top of that.
For sure.
That's super helpful, guys. Thank you so much. Someone asks, my partner is autistic with a PDA profile and was diagnosed in recent years at age 33. We really struggle with how to manage the household duties like cooking and cleaning. I work full time, and so my partner tries to take on the majority of the duties, but this leaves both of us feeling stressed, and as keeping up with everything is a big struggle for him. If finances weren't so tough, we would bring in extra help, but unfortunately, it's not an option. I hate putting the pressure on him, but I don't know what else to do. I am a social worker, so my job is quite stressful, and handling everything at home has sent me into burnout many times before. So I'm trying to prevent us from both being burnt out. Do you have any advice?
You could just say that Lindsay submitted these questions. It's okay. You don't have to like pretend that she, intervention, isn't it?
Ruth
This
and
is
I,
what's
Ruth
going
and I
on.
are,
I'm so sorry, Daryl.
I will say some things that this is like the therapist, this is the ideal response. This is not always how I do things. So just know that, like, I don't take my own advice sometimes, but I do think it's worth looking at if there are just some things that you can drop, like if there's some things that aren't have to do's, or maybe even just taking some quote unquote extreme measures. Like, could you use paper plates like in this season where things are really hard and everybody keeping up with everything is just too much and it's potentially going to affect your mental health? Like, could you really just do some things? I think that's hard too because we feel like we have to be adults, right? Be good adults, do all the things, take care of everything. But when you are raising complex kids and you have a complex family, there's a lot of things at play.
I think that's certainly a facet of it. I'll I'll try to put myself in, I believe it was the husband's shoes. Because our situation is not identical to that, but there's some parallels, I think. And so, from like a lived experience perspective, and someone who has PDA and PDAer, I think you see what you can take away, but also make sure. I always feel it's always easier for me to do things like joint responsibilities like that when Lindsay and I have a good relationship and we are loving each other and we are still including play in our relationship, just the things that like made us fall in love with each other help keep us in love with each other and can be like a glue for us. And so when I feel the demands of things that like none of us probably really enjoy doing dishes or folding laundry or doing laundry or running the vacuum cleaner. I know I don't because I hardly do any of those things, but the things that I do,
You do the dishes.
I do. Um, it's easier knowing that I'm doing them not because I'm going to get quote unquote in trouble if I don't, or there's like some negative reinforcement that happens if I don't. If I know that my partner loves me, understands me, but also has expectations for me as an adult in this relationship, to do these things, it's always easier for me to come at from the perspective of loving each other first. And also I think there's an ebb and flow to it too, trying to support your partner's mental health. I think those things go up and down. I mean, there are days and there are weeks when one of us is doing better than the other.
Mhm.
And I think we try to kind of like play off each other in that sense. And so, yeah, I mean, like, days that Lindsay puts in 10, 12-hour days. I understand that takes a lot out of her. And implicitly, I kind of know that. We've also had conversations about, hey, there's some days that are tougher. And I just, be prepared for that, Daryl, and take up the slack when you can. But there's some days when I'm struggling and I communicate that to Lindsay so she knows where I'm coming from, right? And so I feel like it's a lot of back and forth conversations. It's keeping play in our relationship, making sure that like we are still first and foremost in love with each other as a married couple. And then second of all, how can we support each other's mental health in ways that I think Lindsay kind of now knows implicitly, like how not to overload me, the things to say and do to, help my mental health. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That was a great answer. Thank you, guys.
I think relates actually, Ruth, I think that relates to a question that I saw when you sent me the question list this morning. I think somebody asked like, what do we do if it seems like one of us is always doing well and one of us is struggling a little bit, which I think happens with us too. Thankfully, like we never seem to be struggling at the same time, fingers crossed. And I think the question was like, how do we ever get ahead if it feels like one of us is always behind? And that kind of struck me that I don't have all the context, right? Like I don't know what they mean by get ahead, but maybe just everybody doing their best and just, everyone getting their needs met as best they can and taking care of your kids and keeping your house to like a reasonable level of functionality is enough? And is that what voice is telling us that we always have to get ahead, right? Rather than just doing the best we can. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. We always just are good enough in this house. We don't use the words our best around here. Everything is good enough. Yeah, okay. All right, another question came in was, how do you handle talking about feelings and needs? I find that my PDA partner tends to view my feelings and emotions as demands, which create a big divide between us, and when I'm having any emotion except happiness. I found that I'm always masking in an attempt to reduce his stress, and I believe he's doing the same with me. The pattern is really exhausting and unproductive. When we find space to truly connect, it is beautiful. We just can't seem to get there unless I pretend I'm okay all the time, which is really hard for me.
So I'll say from my perspective, I think Lindsay's emotions can trigger me. And I think we've had conversations about this, but I'll say that I've had to work on this. So my initial reaction is like, you can't put it on the person who has emotions if they're exhibiting normal human emotions. And, they're not, in other words, there's not like a medical reason why they're exhibiting like a wild range of emotions. If they're just being a human and existing and exhibiting emotions, then if that's the case, I put myself in that partner's shoes, that they need to work on those things. And if you're the person exhibiting those emotions, and maybe you can think of some examples of ways we've had conversations about this, but I just know that I've had negative reactions to Lindsay's emotions at times, and she's expressed that to me, and I've had to work on it on the side and be prepared and let myself know that it's going to be okay if Lindsay expresses those emotions. She has in the past. We got through it. We were fine. I don't know if there's any particular feedback, though, that you've given me that you feel like has been helpful in me kind of understanding that, because I feel like I definitely used to react the same way. But I'd like to think that things have changed since then.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the feedback I used to give him was that like anger seemed to be an okay emotion, which is what he went to, but like I'm more prone to just crying, and that didn't seem to be okay. And I was like, what's up with that? Like, why are your emotions okay, but mine aren't? But I do think you've given me feedback too, that like the more you thought about it, some of it was feeling like I had some emotion or something that happened to me that he couldn't help, or like maybe he was the cause of, or maybe our kids were the cause of, which we can't really control how our kids affect me. But I think too, maybe just explaining to you that, like, yeah, it's not the end of the world if I cry. It actually feels really good. Like, I would rather just do that than hold it all in and feel better about it. That yeah, I guess just that I felt okay with crying, right? Like, it's not the end of the world. I'm not like totally overwhelmed by my emotions. I just need to process it and get it out. And I don't know if that helped at all, because I think it always felt like my crying was like something that needed to be solved, and maybe there wasn't a solution to it.
Yeah, I think crying triggers me in general. Um, I think,
Triggers our 10-year-old PDAer as well, so some connection there.
and so I think like the answer I want to give is like, let me talk to your spouse and let me try to explain some of these things. You don't want to tell him or her just to deal with it. That won't work, right? But maybe I think whenever I can fully grasp why I feel an emotion that I feel, it helps me understand that emotion and be able to be prepared for that emotion and work with that emotion. So if I'm, to Lindsay's point, if I know that crying triggers me and always has and probably always will, because it's uncomfortable for me, because I love her and I hate to see her hurt, because maybe sometimes it's because of me or our children. Um, that stinks, but to understand that it happens, and in the moment, you just have to listen to your partner and love them and give them what they need, like you're not going to make them stop crying by being upset with them or putting up a wall. I don't know if that makes sense. I just think you need some introspection. And if I was the partner who was say being emotional, triggering the emotional partner, I try to take those conversations offline, so to speak, and talk to them separately about this in a neutral environment, a neutral time, and try to walk through that with them why they might feel the way they do to help them get an understanding of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it kind of like it all goes back to how with the PDA nervous system, you like any emotion can be perceived as threat, you know? And in our household, my husband and I both very much identify with PDA, and we've learned to like, when we can, it's not always possible, but with our emotions, like come to the other person with, if we know we're going to have a triggering emotion, we come with them with the intent like, hey, I need to get this out. I am not looking for solutions right now. I just need to vent. Or like, I need to say this. I'm not looking for you to react this way, to kind of like help lower that threat response when I come at him or when he comes at me. And I think that's been helpful. Again, it's not always possible, but when I can, I try to do that.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I think so
Yeah.
too.
Okay, another question was, can you think of examples of the challenges you had earlier in your marriage that were related to PDA that you've been able to kind of turn around over time? Would you consider any of those challenges now to be some of your strengths, or were they just neutralized?
We don't have enough time to go through this list. Go ahead.
Well, two things that popped up, like I was just thinking about this the other day. Before we had kids, we actually got up at the same time because we went to work at the same time. And I like am just a morning person, and I would wake up and I'd be like so chatty and want to talk about everything. We'd be like sharing the bathroom. And one day he was just like, hey, I'm really sorry. Like, could we just not talk before work? Because I am just not in the place to do it. And I think initially I was a little bit hurt, but we made it work. And then since then, when we've had disagreements before we knew you were PDA, sometimes I subscribe to like, no, we need to solve this, right? Like, I don't want to go to bed with this unresolved. And I don't think either of us recognized at the time that the more I pushed it, when he was like, I just need a break, I just need to be done. And I'm like, no, we need to solve this. Then he would, get activated and like maybe yell at me or say something really unkind. And so I think that I've had to learn over time that like sometimes I do just need to be okay with walking away and taking a little bit of time because he is telling me that he's too overwhelmed and can't continue to talk about it. Those were the two things that came to mind. I don't know, are there any other quote unquote challenges or issues you can think of?
I'm late all the time and you like to be early.
That's true.
Case in point, this. And I think it's through maybe a combination of you understanding where I'm coming from, but also kindly, letting me know. I really appreciate it if you could be timely and continue to please work on this. So I feel like a lot of times, a lot of our examples are a combination of one of us understanding where the other person is coming from, but not being like okay, well, because you are this way, that means you get to do anything you want. It's okay, I understand where you're coming from, but like we still live in a society, and I would appreciate it if you could try to meet me halfway at least on this issue, whatever that may be.
Yeah, then I think just specifically for the example of being late, but it could probably apply to a lot of things. Like the more pressure I put on you, like, hey, we're leaving in 10 minutes. Hey, we're leaving in 5 minutes, or like getting really upset, like that's obviously going to shut him down more and make it harder. So I do the same thing with our kids of like trying to be chill, trying to, be supportive. Like what can I do to help you get out the door, to kind of like support his nervous system, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful. And that touched on a couple other questions. Like a couple people had asked, like, what does PDA accommodation like look like within a marriage? And like what ways can a PDAer accommodate themselves within a marriage that they can still access the relationship they're looking for? I don't know if there's anything else you want to expand upon from that than what you were just saying, or if not, we can totally move to another question.
Well, I think you've talked about like just for yourself really having to back way up, like, right? Because by the time you get to the point that you're activated or yelling or shut down or whatever your reaction is, like it's too late, right? So you have to back way up. One thing that we started doing several years ago was Daryl was really prone to like coming downstairs and yelling at somebody or like being upset, right? Because you wake up kind of vulnerable in the morning, and we realized that. So I was like, could you just wake up? And I get up early and he does not. when you wake up, could you just like stay in bed for 30 minutes and like scroll your phone and wake up and kind of get your bearings before you come downstairs so that you're a little more regulated? And I think that's been really helpful.
Yeah, do you want to share the story of what our PDAer said a couple days ago when I came down the stairs?
I don't remember. What did he say?
Dad's not angry because he was upset.
Oh yeah, because our kids would like fight and he would be asleep and he would just wake up and like come stomping down the stairs, like ready to fix everything. And our PDA does not have a lot of meltdowns anymore. But he had a big one that morning. He was really upset and was like yelling curse words. And yeah, you came downstairs and he said once he was calm, like, yeah, Dad's not mad, because years ago that would have been the case. So trying to think what else to accommodate. You've talked about really needing like time to yourself. So that's part of the reason he's staying up so late right now, because our kids are going to bed too late. I really need like enough sleep to be regulated. He really needs enough alone time. So right now that means like sometimes staying up until the sun comes up. And he works for himself. He has his own business, so he can do that. I don't think it's like ideal for any of us, even you, but he knows to be regulated enough, he has to have some time away from our kids and me. And our kids are homeschooled, so they're with us all the time. So I think you accommodate yourself that way too.
Yeah, like general consensus is identify why the behavior exists, why you might be doing something a certain way or feeling something a certain way. And perhaps that's a trait of being on the spectrum, or being a PDAer, and then say, okay, great, we kind of understand, so we can put a name on it. We can like wrap our arms around whatever this thing is, and then okay. But that being said, that's not okay. It's not okay for you to, you know, be upset and vulnerable in the morning. Not okay to be late for everything, whatever that is. So let's work on it offline in a neutral time and place. Don't just give that person the feedback when they've made the mistake or done the behavior that you don't want them to be doing, right? And like loving them, meeting them where they're at, but then saying, hey, my expectation is I would appreciate if you could do a better job with this. Can you please work on this? And it might not be the first, second, third, it might be the 100th time of asking for it in a neutral way before you might see some of that progress. And that could be, I know, very frustrating, but sometimes it might take some time, especially for behaviors that might be ingrained for decades.
I think that's true. And I've tried to change how I approach him too. Some of it was from feedback from him. Like if plans change, I need him to do something that was not part of his plan for the day, of just like saying that up front, like, hey, I know this wasn't part of your plan, or I know this is like an extra demand for you, but I really could use your help on this, or we need to do this. And I think you've said that kind of helps disarm things a little bit, like just acknowledging, I know this is really hard for your brain to do this, and then it makes it easier for you to help out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you guys have time for one more question?
Sure.
Keep them coming.
Hey, right.
Silent. I don't know what that means,
Yeah.
but we haven't heard of sheep.
All right. Well, okay. What do you do when your PDA kid, age 8, only feels safe around one of their two parents? Dad and son are both PDA and they are constantly triggering each other. They get along for some stretches, but the son doesn't feel safe and he's always poking at dad to get the explosion he believes is coming and always equalizing. Mom is the safe person, but also neurodivergent and needs time for her nervous system to recover, but rarely gets it. She can't leave the house without huge repercussions that the kid will mask with dad and explode on her when she comes home. Mom really feels like a prisoner that can't leave her home without traumatizing her kid, and it's really destroying her mental health. How do we find balance if we're always headed in to burnout?
Tricky. My initial thought is since both dad and kid struggle with each other sometimes, is there some sort of like shared interest that they can like bond around or get involved in, like when mom has to be gone, because one, that sort of, helps their bond, like helps build trust and connection, but also is maybe something that feels safe that they're both interested in. That's like such a small piece of that question, but that's where my brain first went to.
Where my brain first went to is we need the wives to bring their husbands to these calls so that I can talk directly to them. And obviously, does it have to be, whatever that is, a heterosexual relationship. It could just be primary partner, secondary partner. It could be, neurotypical, neurodivergent partner. Because it's difficult to give in this case, it sounds like the mom's advice about the dad who's PDA, who's, you know, triggering the son without the dad hearing some of this. The dad, in my opinion, first of all, needs I hope that he takes some accountability in this, and but he needs to understand why things are happening, in my opinion. Why is this? And I think we've had a lot of those conversations. That's been very helpful to me of, you know, hey, Daryl, you should like use the first thing in the morning example. You come downstairs, you're usually triggered by our PDAer, and then he is waiting for you to have a negative reaction, which was cool that a couple days ago he was waiting for it and it never came and he verbalized that. But the point is that Lindsay had to communicate that to me over a period of time. Then I had to accept it. Then I had to take ownership of it. And then I'd say, okay, well, that this is what we know now. So then we can work on solutions for how I can set myself up to be successful, a la not coming downstairs first thing in the morning and rushing into something. And, you know, like I feel like you have to take those steps back and have these conversations offline, so to speak, and do this to, you know, and do these things. You have to have these conversations offline to be able to work together on a solution. It's hard to, you know, say, well, tell your husband this or tell your husband that. I think the first thing is love them where they're at, explain what's going on, explain how you feel, say, hey, I want to find a solution here. Let's not always talk about this in a negative light, or this is so, you know, this is because most likely I would guess the only time this comes up in conversation, something bad happens and mom is burned out, going through burnout, and this is super stressful. Like, let's find a time when it's neutral, talk about this, say, hey, let's fix this, let's solve it. Let's not just make it a negative and have a negative connotation around it all the time. Because I think if Lindsay only brings up something to me when I make a mistake about it or do something bad, then we need to that's a problem. I'm going to assign a negative connotation to that as opposed to like loving me first, having those conversations on the side.
That makes a lot of sense. We
Y'all talk about me in chat.
No, something separate.
Okay.
Yeah, we have this. I feel like I could have written this question a year ago. And one thing I'll say that really helped in my marriage is that, and we're in a completely different place now, is we did couples therapy as well. That really helped just kind of, and we actually worked a little bit with Lindsay and her husband. They joined together and we talked to them, which was really helpful. But it's just, my husband really had to like get really on board with PDA and like really understanding how to accommodate it. And it took a long time. I mean, we've been on the journey for a few years, so it's not an easy one. So I identify with you, and we're in a much better place now that he fully understands. And yeah, he's had to do a lot of things to accommodate himself. He didn't realize how burnout he was either. So we have had some major shifts in our life, but
And it's hard. Sometimes you don't realize until, I mean, you hit burnout, right? But then like, where's the space? It's a lot of work to create the space to get out of it because you're also raising high needs kids. And so you're like building the plane while it's taking off and trying to figure out these things about yourself that you didn't know about. And it's just, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. And I only say it to say that like when we were in it, I felt like there was no way out. Like I thought that divorce and like living in separate households was the way out. And we're in a completely different world now. And my very externalized kiddo loves his dad so much now. And it's, you know, the repair can happen. So it takes time, but I think that is all the time we have for today. But I thank you guys so much for joining us as a couple and for being able to share together your experience. And we hope to do some more stuff with you guys soon. And thanks to everybody who joined us today. This will be up on YouTube soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Have a good day.